Economic slavery, or wage slavery, refers to one's total and immediate dependence on wages to survive. Although people throughout history have had to work to get by, we now live in a culture where we are led to believe we have economic freedom, when unbeknownst to most citizens, we are in fact bound in servitude. The 40-hour work week came about during the Industrial Revolution in Britain, when at one point workers were putting in 10 to 16-hour days and began to protest. Working situations for Americans began to worsen as well, and by 1836, labor movement publications were also calling for a 40-hour work week. Citizens in both situations were so overworked, an 8-hour day was easily accepted. This system is unnecessary now, if it ever was, but we still accept it due to the effects of our capitalist society. There are many contributing factors that have led to our current economic system and continued acceptance of the 40-hour work week, three major factors being consumerism, inflation, and debt. Inflation. Let's say the US government needs money for whatever war they've decided to wage this year. They ask the Federal Reserve for a loan, and the Fed agrees to buy bonds from the government in the amount of the requested loan. The US government then prints up a bunch of pieces of paper that say Treasury bond, while at the same time, the Federal Reserve prints up a bunch of little pieces of paper that we know as money. A trade is made between the government and the Federal Reserve, and the US government directly deposits this newly printed money in a different bank, which in turn takes its cut in fees and interest. And just like that, money has been created out of thin air. Although this process takes place electronically now, the problem either way is that it depletes the worth of the dollar. At one point in time, currency was worth gold. That was what gave money its value, but now the value of money is trusted to the Federal Reserve, who has no moral objections to reducing that value by printing more money. It works like this with private bank loans to citizens as well. Debt. Since money is created through loans, that means it's created through debt. Money equals debt, and debt equals money. So the more money there is, the more debt there is, and vice versa. If somehow the government and every citizen in debt were able to pay back those loans, there would not be a single dollar in circulation. Interest plays an important role in this equation as well. When you take out a loan and the bank gives you money that technically doesn't exist, they also expect you to pay additional interest with it. If the money loaned is coming from the Federal Reserve, where is the money for the interest supposed to come from? The answer is nowhere. That means no matter what, the nation will never be able to get out of debt, and that is exactly the purpose of this meticulously orchestrated system. Consumerism. Consumerism is defined by the Merriam-Webster dictionary as the belief that it is good for people to spend a lot of money on goods and services. At one point in time this belief may have rang true, but with the current capitalist system and cost of living, consumerism has begun to have negative effects on our society, especially when you take inflation and the increasing debt into consideration. Psychological insinuations have been planted into society's subconscious for generations through consumer advertisements, which have ultimately led to certain habits and beliefs. Some examples are, buy now, pay later. The General Motors Acceptance Corporation started this mindset when it was established in 1919 and began to promote giving loans to people who bought cars. Americans eventually started to use the new credit plans on just about everything. Keeping up with the Joneses, commonly thought to be the beginning of the American consumer culture, this mindset began when GM introduced the yearly automobile model change. People wanted to have the latest model each year, and soon this idea spread out. Most of us, whether we want to admit it or not, are familiar with this mentality. Rather than keeping our old toaster that works perfectly fine, we want the new retro-style stainless steel model because it looks swanky sitting on our kitchen counter. 1929 to 1945 Depression and War. Soon after the Depression came World War II, during which advertisers promised products to be available when there was peace. As a result, consumers were eager to take up spending immediately after the war was over. Peace. When the war ended, consumer optimism and economic growth accompanied victory. Charge it. Credit cards were first promoted through the Diners Club, a charge card company that services affluent and well-traveled individuals from around the world. Other companies followed suit and started advertising credit cards as a time-saving device rather than a way to spend money that wasn't actually there. Bigger is better. During the 1970s, companies began to send credit cards out by the masses to those who had not requested them. While Americans had already been developing the idea that bigger is better, the credit card boom ended up exploiting that idea. Now people had the means to obtain extravagant items they couldn't before, even though it put many in colossal debt. Congress soon had to regulate the credit card boom and ban sending cards to those who never requested them in the first place. The 40-hour work week is the ultimate tool for corporations to sustain this culture of overindulgent spending. Under our current working conditions, people are forced to build a life in the evenings and their days off. We find ourselves more inclined to spend heavily on entertainment and conveniences because we rarely have any free time. When we do have time to ourselves, it's usually fleeting, and we eventually find ourselves neglecting those activities which are free. Keeping America unhealthy has become extremely profitable for big business, and so far their efforts have paid off beautifully. Our society has been transformed into an industry fueled by economic slavery, and consumerism is a key factor in this corrupt system, one that people have direct influence over. Consumers are the only ones who can stop consuming. To read this report in full, and for a list of sources, please visit www.anonymousnews.com.